Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Shuchi, and I'm director of the Transnational Literature Series at Brookline Booksmith in Boston, Massachusetts. The Transnational Literature Series focuses on themes of displacement with an emphasis on works in translation. Our bookstore, Brookline Booksmith, is currently closed to the public, and for the rest of the year, we'll be holding all our author events through this virtual format. We host events weekly with writers and translators from all over the world. You can keep up with what we have scheduled by visiting the Transnational Series page on Brookline Booksmith's website and by signing up for our weekly email newsletter. Just a few Crowdcast pointers for those of you who haven't been on this platform before. You'll see a chat window on the right-hand side of the screen. My colleague Pierce Alquist will be including links and information in the chat throughout the event. Along the bottom of the screen, you will see an Ask a Question feature where you can enter in your questions at any point. We'll get to those at the end. And next to that, you'll see a green button that says Buy Minor Detail, which will open up a separate window and direct you to tonight's book at Brookline Booksmith's online shop. And finally, you can see us, but we can't see you, so please be with us in whatever way you are most comfortable. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing Adania Shibli. Adania Shibli was born in Palestine. She holds a PhD from the University of East London and has published 3 novels in Arabic. She splits her time between Berlin and Jerusalem. She's here to share the latest of her novels to be translated into English, Minor Detail. Quiet, atmospheric, stunning, Minor Detail fuses 2 stories, decades apart, to reveal the very real undercurrents of fear, anxiety, and everyday violence and erasure of Palestinian life under Israeli occupation. The first half of the novel is set during the summer of 1949, 1 year after the Nakba, and follows a troop of Israeli soldiers stationed in the Negev desert as they attack and murder a group of Bedouins. The story picks up many years later in the near present day as a woman in Ramallah tries to uncover the details of the murder of one of the Bedouin women, pursuing it to the point of obsession. The slow build to the novel's unforgettable end is just masterful. Fatima Bhutto writes in her review in The Guardian, the book is at varying points terrifying and satirical, at every turn dangerously and devastatingly good. Minor Detail was published by New Directions in the US and translated into English by Elizabeth Drickett. Adania is calling from Berlin. Joining Adania in conversation is the writer Madeleine Thien. She is the author of 4 books, most recently the novel Do Not Say We Have Nothing, which won the 2016 Scotiabank Giller Prize and the Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction, and was shortlisted for a number of major prizes, including the 2016 Man Booker Prize. She lives in Montreal and New York and is a professor of English at Brooklyn College, Queens. She's joining us from Montreal. Thank you all again, and now Adania and Madeleine.
Thank you so much, Sushi, and hello to everyone out there. I'm sorry that we can't see you. I think this is a very new and unusual and perhaps a little discomforting experience for me and Adania. But we're so glad that you could join us. So we'll start by having a conversation, Adania and I, and then we'll open up after about 30 minutes or so for questions. And partway through there, Adania will read a little bit from Minor Detail, and she'll read in Arabic.
I'm actually envious of the people who are seeing us, but we can't see them. I prefer we're in that position.
I agree, because I feel they're really all comfortable with like nice cozy places. With pillows.
And the pajamas.
Yeah. Should we I'd love to just start by checking in with you. It's been a year since I've seen you. The last time I saw you was in Berlin. How are you? How are things around you? What is life like for you at the moment?
I don't know, it's mean to say that maybe, but it's good. My sister says the world calmed down a bit. And it's really true. It's a hard moment to calm down, to stop everything. But it's a time to read, to write, to see in a this kind of almost like close-ups of the surrounding around, and it's a different creates a different sensitivity. Although we were speaking about that, it also a sort of a deja vu of life in Palestine, before I came to have my life in Berlin or London before, because this is the lockdown that you would have as your daily reality. Yeah. So it's almost Palestine. Being in Berlin is like being in Palestine 2090s. Yeah.
Does it make you feel more at home in the familiar sense, not in necessarily the contented sense? Is there something about the places merging, or the almost the superposition of one over the other, where you can start to see how they're touching in a different way than before?
It was a strange feeling, as if like the body suddenly remembers something, and it didn't. It's really I was noticing people complaining and getting angry and having these kind of depressed. They're depressed or in a depressive mood, and for me, it's like, yeah, okay. So the world. People are normally happy, and when this is not the case, they're unhappy, and you remember a certain, not unhappiness, but a certain heaviness that you live with it. And it was easy for me to live it again. It's not wonderful to live it again, but it's something that is not alien to you. You're not surprised. You're not surprised that there are no cultural events, that things are canceled, that you cannot see your friends, that you cannot move freely. It's something, yeah, okay, I know how to function in such a situation. So suddenly your body knows how to move. And as if the distance, let's say, of more than a decade, because, the situation in Palestine has changed, and the situation is not as severe as it was in early 2000s. So, but still your body remembers that within a minute. There's no gap, as if time suddenly disappears.
Mm.
And I never thought that this kind of experience would be useful here in Berlin with a virus. It's very, very strange feeling.
There's the other sort of corollary to it, which is also under these conditions, under this sort of lack of mobility, in a way taking away certain certainty about things, or that there's also a question about how to protest, how to go into the street, how to move, when to choose, how to act, when to speak, and all of those things are sort of colliding in this moment.
Yeah, and although there's a difference, because when you are subjected to this in Palestine, you are resisting it. You know that it's not for your own good, but it's fascinating to see how this almost same experience and it's being presented that it's for your own good. And this is like the only difference. And actually also in Palestine, because I was following the somebody called the coordinator of the occupation. There's like some jobs, not only in cultural institutions, there are coordinators, but also coordinators for occupation. And it was fascinating. He's an Israeli military officer, and it was fascinating to see his language, this kind of almost this kind of paternal, loving tone. It's good, you Palestinians, you're staying in your homes. It's good, you're not moving. And it was like really kind of a weird, like, okay, yeah, so now suddenly occupation is being packed for our own good. And it's the same discourse. So like you have suddenly this discourse that we're doing it for your own good. Suddenly you need to adapt it in Palestine, while also the military would go on arresting people at night, killing people. And so it's kind of the same tools, but the language is different. It's also interesting how such a thing can be, made. The same activity can be performed, but still it has a different perception, although our body remembers it as the same one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is on that level, it's a bit contradictory, and you try to understand, and you think, should I oppose that? But then it's also the right wing, the people on the right wing, that they're opposing that. And are you on their side? But then also there are the protests now in the US, which is something wonderful to see, and it raises hope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I want to actually come back to that through your book, to what's happening in the the U.S., but let's start with Palestine. It is.
I thought we finished. I said everything about Palestine.
Oh, you should see my reams of notes here. I mean, we talked by email and a little bit beforehand that it's a deeply unsettling novel. It is a searing book.
I'm sorry.
No, thank you. I read it as a deeply philosophical novel, and that at the heart of it, this minor detail, the idea of the minor, least significant detail keeps recurring in the text, that it is about nothing less than existence itself, existence as this return, recurrence, death, and birth. And it's sort of about this like long afterlife of individual actions across the time and space of Palestine and Israel. And the novel is made, as Shuchi was saying, with these two parts. I almost don't want to call them halves. I don't know whether to call them pieces. I almost thought of them as two irreconcilable parts that are brought together in a kind of proximity. And I thought maybe the first thing we should do is place those pieces side by side for those who haven't read the book. So there's one part which takes place in 1949, after the Palestine War, after the Nakba. It's August 9th to 13th. The presence in that part of the novel is a military, is an Israeli officer, a commander. He is part of a horrific series of crimes. And this consciousness and presence of this officer creates an almost unbearable tension in that part of the book, in terms of also the way that you are in proximity, but it's not intimate. And I think that really fascinated me, the way there's a kind of discernment between proximity but not interiority. And then there's the second, or the other part, just set probably in the present day, with a young woman, a writer in Ramallah. And then, can I just add one thing too before I ask you this question? So there's also the third presence who exists throughout the book, and that is the girl, the Bedouin girl, who at the beginning of the book witnesses the murders of, in all likelihood, her family. And she's made to suffer quite violently before she is executed in the desert. But her presence is an intimacy, but we never are with her narratively in that sense. So I wanted to start by asking you, with these presences of the book, where did you begin? Like in that first beginning of trying to find the language for this, for the pieces you wanted to put together, what was your starting place?
It's actually, you introduced the answer with the word language. I mean, my relation to the word, my passion, my existence is like, I'm a person in love with words and with language, and this is like what I carry with me when I speak, when I'm silent. And for me, this is, I know the book is taking place somewhere and has events or actions and characters, but really it started as a linguistic anxiety and questioning. For me, it's it even goes on a joke that I heard, but I will not tell this joke. It's basically, would a stutterer be able to imitate those who speak perfectly? My relation to language is always also strange, because a language is not there always for me or for us. And there are like also certain times in your life that you feel language disappears from you, or I felt that it disappears from me. And for me, that was a question, why language abandons us at certain moments, whether when we become speechless, when we miss the words, when we scream, when we shout, when we basically not being to articulate things the way those who can articulate them, who can narrate, who can tell a story that has no cracks in it, in a way, a story that is so complete that you cannot doubt its truth. And that's where my fascination. And I could see those who use language. And I actually don't like people using language as an instrument, because it becomes an instrument also of power to communicate something I struggle with, and I because it's not something that I would like to be in the side of power, but to look at this power and to disturb it. Not because I'm meaning to disturb it, because this power also creates these disturbances in me, and especially in my language. So I was wondering what language, if we take the powerful, who has the ability to tell the story so perfectly with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a story that it probably would be believed by most people and not doubted. I mean, it's really like sometimes there are people who tell a story and you cannot doubt it. With using a certain language that you cannot use, or I cannot use, and why? For me, the question why language betrays or disappears or leaves us at certain moments. And I talk here also maybe a bit about the Palestinian context, and not only the personal one. When you see the Palestinians really trying the whole time to find their own language to describe their pain, and they borrow from the language of others because they cannot articulate it, because they're always being asked about that pain, when most of the time actually you don't want to say anything about that pain. You want just to bury it, not to look at it. Like with any also situations we come across and we live through, and different in the personal, the political, the social, whatever. So I was really interested in this perforated language, a language that doesn't hold itself together. What kind of story can be told in this case? And this is the second part. Mm-hmm. So it is a linguistic question. Sometimes I joke. Yeah.
So it's true, exactly. I mean, I think with the second part, but the first part, I'm really interested in how you sort of found a space for an inside and outside sort of realm in that first part, when we're very, as I said, in proximity to this officer. We see sequence of his movements, his gestures. We see him from morning till night. We're with him. And yet there is something so it's like there's a fissure in there. It's almost, I sometimes almost felt like, because it's a third person part of the book, it almost felt like some of this narration was coming from the sand itself. It was almost as if every action had left its imprint. And in trying to see these 4 days in August, the hour by hour accumulation of this crime, which is sort of enclosed in these 4 days, but also in a way never leaves the space, as we find later in the book. And that I found interesting. There was something about the language that you chose. It's extremely vivid. It's extremely immersive. It's also spare. And there's a cadence to it that I found as a reader I could neither speed up nor slow down. I had to be with it, step by step, even if these were steps I didn't want to take. So I am very sort of moved and as a writer, curious how you grappled with trying to find that thread, to go through that section.
Yeah, I mean, as I was saying, it's like maybe the attempt to imitate the good speaker. I mean, are we those who are failing in language? Can we ever speak the language of those who are speaking perfectly? And what this exercise means also. I don't know, maybe that writing that part was a personal look at the narrative structure in its classical form and wanting to go till the end with it, till it suffocating itself, but gently.
It doesn't even know it's doing it in a way to itself.
Yeah. And it's the character. For me, it is the language of the character. So I tried, can one be that character? And if that character, how would that character see the world and see language? And sometimes, this is like really, it's not the language that is narrating him, but it's all him, even the language that is being used to narrate him. It is him.
I'm just gonna kind of, because I've lost the video of Adania. Is that just me? Shuchi, if you're there.
I'm here.
Well, her video is showing, so I think it might just be yours.
Okay, so Adania, I can't see you, I'll just, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. Yeah,
you cannot see me and not see everybody. Maybe we can click on something.
No, I'm signed in as a different. Oh, actually, great. My partner Rawi just brought his laptop that he's connected to, so I can see you on his. So I may look to the side, which is where I can see you. Okay, great. There's one other thing I'm curious as I want to talk about the other part, but before that, there was something that really struck me that made me think about another sort of rupture between the two parts, which was that the Israeli officer has this capacity to act. He acts, consistently acts, and he has an aim to cleanse the area of an Arab presence. And everything is done with that goal in mind. And because it's one action after another, there's no thinking. There's no space for the act of thinking that would open that private world with him to stop and think what he's doing moment to moment. Whereas in the other part, it's a fascinating, almost sort of, not a mirror image exactly, but she thinks. She's continuously thinking through how it might be possible to reach this place she needs to get to, or attain the information or the document she's trying to get, or something. But all these obstacles are in the way of action. And I wondered about that in terms of something else that's happening in the text about what is the nature of the, I don't know how to phrase it, the cruelty of the nature of the violence, the lack of thinking, the sort of, I don't want to use this overworn phrase, the banality of the evil, but only to the extent that Arendt was talking about, that one gives up the capacity to self-question, to have that conversation with self, that is what got lost in this cliched mind, that then allowed it this capacity to do things which the superficiality of thought blocked all other ways of thinking about what he was doing. And I'm wondering about that, because you're getting very close to true horror in what happens in that first part. And I wondered psychologically, between thinking and acting, what you observed in that connection.
Yeah, and could be also the space of certainty and uncertainty. And I mean, his acts are also maybe a replica of all this certainty in life, where your rhythm will not stop, where everything is expected to go on. And in these cases, you would not think. So a lack of thinking of your acts or your actions or your movements, it's a situation of luxury. Those who constantly question, who are not sure, unsure of every move, where they're going to, and what they're going to step and how things will be. This is also the space of kind of a precarious, uncertain, constantly collapsing world. So for me, that certainty is may lead to what can be said as the banality of evil, but it is found in any banality, I would say. Maybe the banality itself can expectedly lead to evil when you don't question, and also the space how often we can question and re-question, and of course, it's not a comfortable way of living, and nobody chooses to live this life. And the character is not choosing to live this life. She has no choice on anything. She's just like almost like a ball falling, but thinking and falling the whole time, where he's solid and he moves and he doesn't need to think. There's nothing to think about. There's the cleanness. This is what needs to be thought about, the cleanness of the landscape from any Palestinians or their site or their traces or their being, the cleanness of his own immediate space, the cleanness of his own body, the cleanness of the soldiers. So there's this element of cleanness that is, and the cleanness of language itself as well. So they all come together.
And then when you moved into the second part, so she begins by saying that she stumbles upon this article, that she learns about this crime that was committed in the desert. She says that the minor detail that jumps out at her is that the day that the girl dies is the day of her own birth 25 years later. And it seems like a minor thing that shouldn't be significant given the tragedy, as she says, of the whole. And yet it's that thing that seems to have no significance that pulls her into needing to know. She says that the truth in a way pursues her, and she begins to look for information, and there unwinds a whole other series of events where she tries to piece together documents that the journalist could have given to her. The journalist wrote the article and she calls this person, but he doesn't give them to her, and so she goes off to try to find them. And in here you open up this the roadways, the maps, the villages, what appears and disappears in Palestine. And this, I think, is such a powerful part of the novel. And I wondered about this movement now into, in a way, making a space that seems to be holding multiple times within it. Did you have that? Like, did you know that? Did you know when you were writing her that this sort of time space was about to sort of ravel around her in a way that was going to lead her back, but not lead her out?
Actually, no. Maybe this is. I mean, as in my writing, I'm really interested in this space of the minor, of the hesitant, of almost the invisible, and there's that thing which has been maybe dominant, and there's what I like to be on that place, and skipping the first chapter is like maybe the first attempt to go on something that is central also. But it's more not because of the story. The story is used to reflect on other questions on the center and its relation to that which it marginalizes somehow. But writing both of them, actually the method was similar. And writing I never knew where they would go. And I think this is for me, the writing as I said, once that it's almost like this foggy landscape that I would move through and realize. And in this novel, words were really kind of in each text, words, they have a different materialization, and they present themselves differently. Like in the previous novel, and We Are All Equally Far From Love, I felt the words were like this kind of almost you throwing flour in the air and they just fall down. Almost you don't feel them when they fall down, but they are there gently without a sound. But in minor detail, they were really almost like these silhouettes that they go around, and you need constantly to hold them, to catch them. That they're almost like even characters. Each word that stands there, and you should sit quietly and wait to hold them. And I think this is changes in every text. Like now with a new novel I'm working on, it's completely different relation to the words. The words are massive, they're present, they're like stones, rocks, rocky, they're not easy. And in this case, they both were like that. But their revelation within the writing scene came different. And I think for me, like sometimes it's as the writing process, what it recalls, what these words. So the maps, they would come from that. I didn't plan any of this. I didn't actually, even how the novel went through, I kept changing. I worked on this novel for 12 years. It's nothing that comes and is ready. It's like constantly changing and moving and working with Lisan al-Arab, the tongue of Arab. This is like the most amazing sort of dictionary that is occupying half of the shelf of my bookshelves. So it's working with these books that were also like, a word in a dictionary would call another word. And it's funny because I see some of the questions about whether, like, what's the relation of this text to truth or to reality, and it's entertaining as a question because it's let's play with this idea, even that it can be real, but maybe it's not.
But the effect you create is piercingly real. And I'm so fascinated about how you came to another use of language in the experimentation, in the play, and even through the difficulty of it, because the subject matter is hard, very, you feel it, in your body as you're reading this book. But I am very curious how what it is that you were building. I don't know how to ask this question. I mean, because it's because something under the text too is this sort of continuous wordlessness, that the things that the novel is trying to contain are not going to be found in the language, which is sort of pacing around it. They're in the howling of the dog, the continuous return of the dog. They're in images that recur, the clump of grass that's pulled up from the ground and then is pulled up again later. There are these minor details that just resurface and resurface and resurface, and no amount of words in any arrangement is going to stop their coming up out of the ground again. And yet at the same time, the text feels irrevocable. It's interesting to hear you say that you were, in some sense, letting the language do something you hadn't expected, because on the receiving end, there is an unalterability about the text that is incredibly powerful and continues to sort of expand in the reader's mind once the book is finished.
Yeah, I had no agency in that. I think just like I just started with the issue of language. It was a linguistic question that I tried to check it in a form of a story. And it's like sometimes actually writing it is a bit of a frightening experience because things evolve. I don't know, it's almost like which writing, or you feel like you're a pipe, or I don't know. And this is also the fascination with the act of writing, how it reveals itself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, I mean, of course, there is the agency, there is the presence, but it's almost like you are flooded with that. You are taken by something that you are not so much conscious of what's happening. I mean, now we can reflect on that, but the moment of writing it, it probably comes from a place where it presents itself, and then it tries to have the rationale and the reasoning and the logic and why and how and so on. Not that I'm not aware of that, but it's something beyond this kind of calculation. Though it is a very careful process, you know.
Are you saying that it almost intrinsically wants to grow into the shape that it becomes? Like,
yeah, it materializes in its own, almost in its own, with the least interference. And you know why it took also 12 years, because there are things that were not comfortable, words were not comfortable in their places. I mean, the ends were completely different, and even the title, minor detail. I mean, this is almost like you know, you're going around with something which is nameless, and it was a torture to get the title. It was not there always present, the minor detail. One lived it. It was always in the text, but it never came. It was so minor that it didn't claim itself to be a title, you know. It's in that sense, maybe. I really tried for like 10 years, more than 10 years. I like with the drafts, I had so many drafts, and each draft has a new title. Terrible titles, but yeah.
I have one more question to ask you, and then we'll see if there are questions coming in.
Yeah.
I am curious about the notion of work in the text, especially for the second part. And she talks about being at her desk day in and day out, and of this sort of, she says, solitude is so forgiving of trespass borders. It was only thanks to my time spent alone, sitting at my table in the mornings, working on something, working, she puts in quotes, that I was able to make my discovery. And there's a sort of a really strong illusion that the work is to find a way to trespass the borders, but the challenge of finding the space in which one can do that, in which that's a possibility, is that, because there seems to be a tension with the act of writing itself. And I remember at the very beginning of our conversation, you said, you came to writing because you love language, but always in your novels, there's that way of being able to open the language in so many different ways, but also maybe this is just coming from me, that I sometimes feel with writing is a mistrust of language. I have this deep mistrust of language, maybe for the reasons you're talking about, the smoothness, the ability to order things, and by the ordering, push away all those actually significant, insignificant pieces. So that's my question about trespass, writing, work. Is there a way you put those things together?
I mean, probably she's trying to work, not to trespass, or to find this kind of zone of the banality of the daily that can save her, but that she keeps. And it's a new work. I mean, you know, we never know what her previous work. It's always new. It's always something that just started, and probably she's not doing anything. You know, she doesn't produce anything. She's the most useless human being, probably, and that's why she gets obsessed with this minor event, that she's just haunted by it without understanding, and that makes her the most inefficient human being. But on the other hand, what are the efficient human beings? Are in the first chapter, when they have a mission and they have to complete it and they have to do it. So maybe the working and being inefficient is, in her situation, is the best she can do as a human being, and not to follow on the path of the criminal or the perpetrator in a way, who is an efficient person, super efficient. I don't know if maybe I'm just guessing how work appeared, or I'm trying to articulate it.
Yes, because we see her in the motions of going to work or trying to go to work, or in the space around her.
And to pretend there's kind of a normalcy, you know,
Yes.
and she goes on, she's insisting on a certain normalcy. But she did this kind of little mistake. And this is also maybe the situation, what if she didn't? What kind of life would she have? Where would it lead? Would her building be the next? Would her office be, you know, we never know. All these possibilities. Because the pretension of normalcy that she insists on, it doesn't exist in her context. It's not in the setting and in the daily practices, although she insists on that. So maybe she's even a shadow of that officer who's trying to be efficient, but he manages, and she's trying to be efficient, but she's a bit more clumsy. And
yes, I think that it would be hard for me to see her as that shadow. I mean, to me,
or negative.
Yeah, there's something about it that it's almost like it's a plane of reality that she's almost refusing to exist on. And so the stuttering, the clumsiness, the sort of asking the question that doesn't seem appropriate to the moment, and yet in the possibility that she has to make for herself, that's the only way. It's the only way. It's almost a sideways, diagonal motion out of what's confining her.
Yeah, but you know, I still think there is, not that she's a shadow, but maybe she is thriving to a situation where this normalcy and banality that eventually might lead to evil, and when we see it in all colonial contexts and colonized peoples who are trying somehow to imitate the colonizer, it's a kind of a really pervert, not that she's imitating, maybe there's something, the efficiency of the officer, but you're always kind of faced like with the claim that you are the victim of your own behavior, being so clumsy, and you don't have your good language, and when you go on camera you just scream and shout, and you don't have these spokespersons who can articulate the story so perfectly on, you know, whatever situations, because it's like you're always being told that your failures are because of that, not because of somebody who's criminal committing a crime against you. It's you are failing. So, and that way I can understand, like, people who are colonized, they try to imitate the colonizer. You know, this is also the tragedy of many situations and the past decades, and you see it in forms of governance. I mean, now in Palestine, you have the Palestinian Authority, which is the worst imitation of a nation state that follows the Israeli model. And you think, why? Because maybe this is like you always try. If this person was so efficient and managed, and this is the only method for managing, maybe I can do it. But the difference between her and the officer, that the officer has the power and she doesn't have it. But everything is maybe.
I think I'd love to open it for questions now. Is that okay? Adania, also, we were going to ask you to read. So do you have a preference? Do you want to read and then we'll open for questions, or do you want to open for questions and then?
Yeah, maybe we can open for questions.
Open for questions. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Just to have a break from my voice.
Well, so there's only one question so far, and thank you guys both for this conversation. I think if we only have one question, feel free to keep talking. So this one question is from Lisa. She asks, The platoon commander is obsessed with both cleansing the area of Arabs and cleaning his body. What he can't clean is his wound. What does his injury mean in the novel, and how did you treat it?
It's a hard question to answer. I mean, in that with the injury, it's the only thing that he actually takes care of. That he's really trying gently to attend to, and he never notices that it's the source of his own fever, own misery, or his own kind of bad odors. So for me, it was this one that it's his, and he accepts everything that comes with this one, even if it's the worst thing. The Arabs, they didn't do anything to him, but he's very cruel. He just like faces them with with killing, with murder, with chasing them away, but not his one. It's almost his own private, intimate space. That's how it falls. I mean, it has. When it was written, I was really enjoying these parts, enjoying the dirt of it. Maybe it also was my point of release also from all this cleanness in this character. And as it's said, it's always you would hear it a lot in Palestine, Israel, like it's the dirty Arabs. So, and you hear it everywhere, but not in dirty and the dirty in terms of the smelly Arabs. And this is the smell. It's something that also you grow with, like hearing it, seeing it in graffitis and walls, even just somebody turned their back to a Palestinian and saying like a smelly Arab. And then this guy, he doesn't find out his own smell, maybe. And he accuses the girl that she has a bad smell.
Actually, a bunch of questions come in, so if that's okay, Madeleine?
Yes, please, yes.
So this is a question about the translation process. This is from Jeremy. He asks, a lot of this discussion has been about the role of language, and I'd be interested to know whether the translation process has added another layer to this aspect of the novel. Elizabeth Jacquet's beautiful translation brings the novel to us in English. What was this process like, and are there ways in which it's a different book in English than in Arabic?
I think the best is to ask the translator if she can speak about that process. I know it's not easy for translators to to work maybe with me, with my language. But yeah, I mean, it's I think when you have exactly this relation to language, almost every word becomes a character. But I lived with a book for 12 years. The translator doesn't have this luxury to live with a book for 12 years. I wish like, writers and translators, they can have that. But it's, I mean, there's an immense work she did and conversation that we did that sometimes also was hard, like how to treat this word, how it goes. And I think, like any process, the hardship is not separate from the hardship of the writing itself. Because you go back on the same word and you question it and you go back. And sometimes, I would have sleepless nights for if it's this word or that word. And I think if there is hardship or there's this lengthy and unsmooth process of translation, it's only a reflection of this hardship within the work itself.
We actually have another question on translation. I think, and it's speaking to this beautiful phrase of the perforated language. And so Katrina asks, I'm fascinated by the discussion of language, particularly this question of why language abandons us at certain moments, and Adania's choice to write in a perforated language that doesn't hold together. I'd love to hear a little more about the process and perhaps this question of mistrust of language, which in translation becomes compounded with mistrust of translated language.
Yeah, I mean, how for me the question of language and also the translation, because in the Arabic we also had this, or I'm having this exactly the perforated language, that almost enigmatic, almost writing wrong and writing in a way that you don't expect the next word, because sometimes like words we almost, if we concentrate on them and we follow the rhythm, we can expect how they're gonna unfold. And with the second part, there should have been something that it's almost like you're almost constantly falling like this. You cannot walk as he walks in the desert in the first part, and how to pass that. And also, you know, because English might be, because of the experience that it's not a language that is, it's not the language of the powerful. You know, we're talking. I speak English not because out of choice, but this is the language of the colonizer in the context of Palestine. It's the imperial language now of the power. So it's not a neutral language for me. So I would like to perforate also English. I don't want the English to be the perfect English. I would feel it's a betrayal for the second part if the English was one that you don't stumble upon, or you feel comfortable reading it. And I think this was the challenge maybe for how to do that without sounding awkward, because this is a question, like, you know, the editors, the translator, how to be not to be awkward. Of course, for me, it can be awkward. I don't care about the English language. No, I mean, it's not I don't care, but it's like almost my unconscious revenge of the colonizer, you know, like, leave me with your language and your perfect accent, you know. I don't like it. No, but guys, thank you for reading the book in English. Thank you for the translator for translating English. I'm not like, now, I love all languages, but my relation to English is completely different from the Arabic, you know. I feel in Arabic I'm free to break the language as I want. And I think in English you don't have this freedom, because the sense that Arabic doesn't feel threatened. If you come, who are you? Like, you tiny little girl from, I don't know, from this village. You want to break, so go on, play whatever you want. And, you know, this is a language that's like, Lisan al-Arab is like huge. So it doesn't mind if I mess with 2-3 words. But English doesn't have this freedom, maybe. Unless, like, you are called a native speaker, as if you have the authority of that. And I think this is, maybe should be shaken as a concept. Like, why we don't hear accents in the books, in the silence of the novels, when we read them. And they are beautiful. I mean, it's boring to hear this kind of Oxford English the whole time. Sorry for anybody, if there's somebody from Oxford. We love Oxford. Yeah. But yeah, it's this is the language of the powerful.
In that vein, we have a question that's talking about how you're multilingual, and how does being multilingual shape your approach to language? And could your novel be possible in a multicultural but monolingual setting? And along with that, you missed the question?
I missed because I got so much excited about the first part that the multicultural just stopped me. I don't see. Can you please repeat it?
Sure. Sojiang Kang asks, how does being multilingual shape your approach to language? And could your novel be possible in a multicultural but monolingual setting?
I prefer to be multi. monolingual setting with monoculture. No. Yeah, I mean, this is fascinating. Knowing other languages is like so much a precious thing. Like, I like learning languages because I like their grammar, the structure of grammar. Like in German, the verb would come at the end. In Korean, you don't you have a he or a she or they, so you cannot gossip much. You always have to speak to the people, and then you speak about. It's not polite to say you. We always speak about we. And it's fascinating this, like, you read Korean literature and you think, wow, how the characters are being, when we are talking, like in this first chapter, that it's always a he, there is a language that can introduce the he in a different way. So they've been really enriching. Also, Hebrew. I know Hebrew and English and French and German. So it's always, I'm curious about languages, especially Hebrew, the biblical Hebrew. It's beautiful biblical Hebrew. It's not like the new one, which is functional and colonialist and nationalistic. The biblical Hebrew is really poetic. And there are some writers at the beginning of the 20th century wrote that, and I'm really influenced by them. Although they are racist, like Shai Agnon, he's quite racist guy, but he's wonderful. I mean, he's racist and wonderful writer. And his language actually is essential when you go and read Lisan al-Arab. For me, it's how he can be playful. He was also religious. He was a rabbi, so the biblical Hebrew was important for his own writing, but it was funny and light. So the archaic does not always have to be heavy. It's the most amazing stories he have written. And reading them in Hebrew, reading something in English, is always kind of playing with your, going back to Arabic, as if it opens Arabic to new sensibility and to new places. It leads Arabic to new places that Arabic didn't think about. And also, actually, when books are translated into Arabic, they kind of give Arabic a new being. I mean, I shouldn't speak too much about language because I can speak until tomorrow.
Can I just add that it's like, as I listen to it, I can see that you see the language as a physical entity. Like, I almost see you building it up like as a physical structure. And it is really fascinating because my experience of reading it in the translation is that you can't take out a piece without it sort of coming down on itself. Even if it's stuttering here or smooth here, there's something about its physicality that is fascinating and kind of makes sense with the way you're talking about, which I don't think about English in that way.
Language is physical.
I think it is, but there's something about English's smoothness, you're right, that makes a different shape. I can't quite put my finger, but there's something about it's like a thread drawn, whereas what you're talking about is, it feels like you can make it from pieces. There's something very different about it.
Yeah, and I think each text, it also brings with it not only its form or its content, but the language it wants to be written in, and this is variant. And there's not, it can be, I don't know, there are texts that can be written in this kind of smooth, but there is a whole desire of the language itself for why this should be like that. It's you feel it. It's really, it just comes in you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the writer becomes the source of either the redirection or the replenishment of that, in a sense, right? Because as it passes through you, it's up to you whether to let it take that flow or to block it.
That would be a strong writer, to block a sentence that is coming, and wow, I should try that. I want tomorrow to wake up and tell language, okay, I'm gonna resist you.
Just before we end, I would love for you to read, Adania. I know we had talked about you reading a short passage.
A very short one. Should I? Because, yeah. Okay, I'll read from, actually, there's one character that nobody's paying attention to her, and she's like my dearest character in this whole book. I don't know why nobody pays attention to her. It's the girl who's sitting the chewing gum. I really enjoyed writing that part. If there's a joy in writing this novel. So I would like, because this is the launch, this is the first reading, I would like to read that part about her. Okay. وبينما لم يتحرك صف السيارات سوى بضعة أمتار، كنت قد انتهيت من دراسة جميع الشعارات والرسومات المخطوطة فوق الجدار الذي لم تبقى عليه تقريبا رقعة غير ملونة، إضافة إلى صد كم هائل من الأولاد الذين حاولوا بيع أشياء لا حاجة لي بها بالمرة. آخرهم كانت فتاة صغيرة، شعرها منكوش ووجهها أسمر يسيل المخاط من أنفها، تبيع العلكة. فتحت حقيبتي وتناولت من داخلها منديلا ورقيا وقدمته إليها، طالبة منها أن تنظف أنفها، فاختطفت هي من يدي على الفور واختفت عن الأنظار. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you everyone in the comments. They've been very happy and enjoying this conversation.
Yeah, thank you everybody. Thank you. Well, I'm sorry we cannot see you. We could not see each other, but at least we have this possibility. Thank you, Sochi. Thank you, Madeleine.
Thank you, Adania. Thank you, Shuchi. And yes, thank you, everyone. We wish we could have seen you. It makes all the difference.
Bye, everyone.